these are the best Overwatch 2 tank heroes for the average player. That is below Masters in Season 1 of Overwatch 2 Competitive. So let's get straight into this. Now remember, this is for the average player, the players who are below Masters. Now I know Masters isn't exactly average, but everybody below that pretty much is. But if you're a GM player, you'll probably know what we're about to talk about in this video. However, we're not GM players, so we need to get in and get stuck in and discuss all of this because there's some heroes that are incredibly powerful. And it really does kind of depend on what level you're playing the game at. So the first hero we're going to start with, it is Zarya. She is in a tier of her own at the moment. She is incredibly powerful as a tank. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. So the first one is her damage potential is astronomical. But when you couple that with her defensive potential, notably the fact she's now got 2 barriers. Well, she's always had 2 barriers. She had a personal and a projected, but now she can decide to have 2 projected or 2 personal. This means that she can be very adept at preventing damage from killing her teammates that also give her a damage buff, because of course all damage absorbed by the barriers charges Zarya's weapon, and then Zarya does massive damage. Now, just don't shoot the bubbles, right? That's what people say. The thing is, though, you have to shoot the bubbles at some point. You cannot let people run around with bubbles on them and just wait for it to expire. Remember, a bubble absorbs 200 damage, then it will dissipate. Of course, all damage to this will beef up the Zarya, so Zarya really benefits from this. So if you try and burn through bubbles on various targets, Zarya is getting charged, and because she's a tank and she's an Overwatch 2 tank, it means she's super tanky herself anyway, and she can just run into your team and start lasering people down. The way to play Zarya is to just ignore the enemy tank in a lot of cases, unless the enemy tank is a diva or the enemy tank is a Junker Queen. You can absolutely batter those. The other tanks, you can kind of just leave them, just go and kill their DPS or their supports. They cannot do anything to stop you, really. You're so powerful. Now, talking about being stopped and it being super difficult to counter what Zarya is doing, crucially, in Overwatch 1, you could bait out the personal barrier and then you knew it was time to burn down the Zarya. That is no longer the case because she might have another one in reserve. So she can pop a bubble. You think, oh, the bubble's gone. You scream in comms, Zarya, bubble down. But actually, she's got another one now. It is ridiculous. Now, Blizzard have said they are going to look at her for Season 2. So for Season 1, she's going to remain as is. But for Season 2, they might reduce her charge potential off her barriers. But she is so powerful right now. Her playstyle is super easy. If you're a DPS player, you'll really enjoy playing Zarya. She's one of my favorite tanks at the moment, probably because she is so strong. But you can just run into the enemy, run into their face, and just start lasering them down. Use your personal bubble. You can use it twice if you like. You'll get so much charge from it. People can't really avoid charging you for reasons I explained. They have to burn through these barriers. They can't just let you, walk around and do whatever you want with the barriers. It's just not gonna. It's not gonna work. Like they have to attack you. And even if players are ignoring your barriers, no one. When you click on an ally and stick the barrier on them, it's instant. The barrier is. So if they're taking damage, you can just stop the damage and get the charge. Like there's no way that enemy DPS or enemy tanks or even enemy supports can stop that damage going onto your ally, and then you bubble and get the charge. Like they just can't. Like you're always going to have your bubble. She's just so good right now. And of course her ultimate's pretty good. It's always been good. Zarya's ultimate as great for comboing with other ultimates. But in this world now, you can just supercharge yourself and then just throw your grab at the enemy and laser them all down. You could do that in Overwatch 1 as well, to be fair. But in Overwatch 2, it's just so much better. She is just a great tank. And you know what? I think as well, she's quite easy for supports to support because the Zarya isn't in the back lines of the enemy. The Zarya isn't flanking. The Zarya is always in the middle of the fight, bossing the direction of the fight. And that makes it kind of easier for supports to keep you up as well. Zarya is the best by far. Absolutely the best tank. Let's move on to the A tier, the very good tier. We're going to drop Orisa into this. Now, Orisa is an absolute monster. If Orisa just is allowed to do whatever she wants, she will wreck your team. Now, Orisa's got a pretty good skill shot with a spear, but the spear, it's not really about the damage. It's about the fact that this can interrupt abilities. So against other tanks, this is the way I like to play Orisa. I like to bully the other tank quite a lot with Orisa because they find it hard to duel you. And well, Zarya can have a little bit of success against an Orisa, but Orisa is so tanky. When Orisa, like tanky herself, when she uses Fortifying, she's got reduced damage being taken, and it's just ridiculous. She can't be crowd controlled, yada, yada, yada. It makes her tanky. When she's spinning a spear or javelin spin, she's just eating all the projectiles. She's also moving forward. She can also knock you around. Her primary fire is devastating. And of course, when you pop Fortify, the primary fire, you can actually fire for longer because the cooldown on the well, it takes longer to overheat the primary fire, which is just ridiculous. Her ultimate is probably the weakest part of her kit, but I will say something that's kind of cool with the ultimate. You can teleport through a Symmetra, teleport with the ultimate while you've got it active. So if you begin your ultimate on the teleporter and then activate the teleporter, you'll just go through it. So you can actually bomb the enemy team in some ways with an Orisa ultimate. It's not going to work all the time because they're just going to destroy the teleporter, and also if you've got a Symmetra on your team, you're probably going to lose anyway. But whatever. Orisa though, very, very good at dueling other tanks. So what you can do with the Orisa is, again, you play on the front line. You're not flanking. You're not like doing any kind of crazy stuff. You're not a dive tank. You're just methodically walking with the payload or wherever you need to be at the front of your team, pushing into the enemy. You cannot be instantly killed. There is nothing that will kill you instantly. If you're taking a ton of damage, you can disengage. And this is where all the options and a kit start coming into play. If you're taking loads of damage, you can use Javelin Spin and back off. You can use Fortify and back off. You are so tanky. Your supports will love it. They'll be able to pump you full of heals again. And off you go again. Your primary fire, though, is where the majority of your damage will come from. And it is just, you land the headshots with this thing. And, it takes a little bit of time to get good with it. But honestly, it's not that difficult because you're just constantly firing all the time. It's just so effective. But the thing with, like I said, the thing with Orisa is it's so hard when you look at other tanks in the game. They can't really deal with the Orisa can just do what she likes. Nothing can really stop her. The reason why Zarya is above is because Zarya can just kill the enemy team. Orisa can also kill the enemy team, but it's more of like a slow, inevitable push off Orisa. It's not this rapid burst of Orisa's in your face. Oh my god, 3 people are dead. What has just happened? Orisa is like dueling your tank. If you've got a Reinhardt against Orisa, well, let's just use the Reinhardt example. Orisa will just wreck his barrier and then just kill him. Well, maybe not kill him, but do loads of damage to him so she gets loads of ultimate charge. He's always putting him on the back foot. And I think that's a good way to put this, actually. Orisa always puts the other tank on the back foot. So she's always kind of got the momentum with her. So she's really, really good. Now, there is an argument where you could put Orisa lower. You could say, well, actually, Orisa's not that great. You should start going through the ranks. But I don't believe that. I think this Orisa is just, like, really, really good. The rework is just giving her so much power. And I think she's still got a lot more power potential as well. But this is a very, very strong tank. If you want to pick a tank to go and fight the other tanks, just play Orisa. If you want to pick a tank to go and fight the rest of the enemy team and kill them while also maybe ignoring their tank, unless it's a Jungle Queen or a Diva, then play Zarya. And Zarya will get you more wins. But Orisa is more of a tank, if that makes sense. I don't know, it's really weird. But these two are like such high damage potential. It is incredible. Let's move on to Sigma. Now, Sigma is also a very, very good. Now, we haven't really spoken about map-specific heroes. Now, obviously, if you were playing a dive comp, it would be difficult to make Zarya and Orisa work in dive because, well, you can't dive. Same for Sigma. You couldn't use him in dive. However, Sigma's projected barrier and barriers in general are really good in Overwatch 2 because there's so few of them now that his barrier can be used to such a good... Like, you think about Circuit Royale. You think about Widowmaker's prevalence on those maps. This tank can just shut them down. It's like, that's the end of Widow. We've got a barrier. You can't shoot through the barrier. Goodbye. On the first point and on the second point. But even just in general play, on any map, the barrier is really, really good. The other component to Sigma, again, is his self-sustainability, his self-survivability, and also his damage output. Now, it's not mega burst damage like these two tanks ahead of him. They will kill people. Like, and they are killers and murderers, right? Sigma may have lost his mind, but Sigma will still be hitting you with his 2 balls, like bang, 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 bang. But he will end up with a lot of damage. There's a lot of splash damage that Sigma tends to get. And again, Sigma has always been kind of... he's kind of the same as he was in Overwatch 2, in Overwatch 1, sorry, in terms of his playstyle, where you're looking to alternate your barrier and your suck. So when your barrier is up, your suck is recharging, your barrier takes a bit of damage, you bring your barrier back, your barrier will start recharging, then you start sucking. But the crucial thing is, when you're sucking the damage, is not to immediately deploy your barrier, is to wait for the shields from the suck, because the damage you absorb through suck gets converted into shields. That gets applied to you, it gets applied to Sigma, and then when that's removed, you then put your barrier back out again, and you just keep going like that. He's got a lot of sustainability in that way. And again, he's played in with the team. He's not a flanker. You're not going to see him in the enemy's back line or whatever. He's just going to be with the team. He's going to be pushing forward. He's that sort of very slow, relentless march, kind of similar to Orisa, although I do think Orisa is better than him at that job, at just piling out damage and sort of dictating the flow of the fight. The only thing Sigma has really got over Orisa, I'd say, yeah, it's his barrier, but also it's his ultimate. His ultimate is good. And more often than not, you will get fight wins with Sigma's ultimate, because it will, you pick somebody up in Gravitic Flux and then you hit them with your primary fire and they hit the ground, they're probably dead. Or the rest of your team will just shoot them because they're very easy when they're hovering in the sky. But yeah, don't sniff at barriers. Don't be like, oh, these barriers are crap in Overwatch 2. They're not. Sigma is great. Good damage potential. He can delete abilities with his Vortex. He can... his ultimate's really good. He's got a barrier. Like Sigma is just... He is good. He's like got a lot of tools and he's always doing a lot of stuff. Really good hero pick at the moment. The next one is D.Va. Now, D.Va, right, this is where it gets spicy. Because D.Va, if you're a GM player or you're like playing super high masters or even mid masters, D.Va is really good. You could even put her in the S mega tier, right, with Zarya, because D.Va is your dive S mega meta tank. Zarya isn't that, and in fact we could do that now, but I'm going to just leave it into A very good, just because I think in terms of team comps, teams playing dive or teams just generally playing some sort of brawl, I think the brawly comps work better, and so Zarya you generally see more. You don't really have to depend on your team as much with Zarya, where with D.Va you obviously do. If you're going to dive onto a target, you need some help, right? You can't just be going out on your own. But still, her high damage potential on single targets, almost like an assassin, is really, really good. So if you're flying towards a target and you're firing at them and then using micro missiles and you bash into them, that is a hell of a lot of damage. And on squishy targets, you can kill them. The problem is you can get caught out of position quite easily. So when we're talking about like the average Overwatch player, you can feed quite a lot on D.Va because you can just fly into the enemy team and, oh, I'm dead, I'm out of my mech, and then you're useless. Whereas these three, well, you can't really do that. So you're more methodical in your approach. I love saying that in this video, but you get more value. That's the thing to take away from this. Whereas D.Va, it's a bit harder to get the value, but if you're a better player, yeah. But she's definitely the best dive tank as well. Definitely above Winston, which again in previous videos or even like a week or a week and a half ago, I'd have probably put Winston over D.Va, but actually turns out that D.Va is much stronger simply because of that DPS potential. In Overwatch 2, if you can kill someone, that is a very, very powerful thing to do. And Winston kind of struggles to kill people in a one-on-one scenario, whereas D.Va does not. And in fact, a lot of these tanks don't. They can just take people down, which is mega, mega strong. But yeah, D.Va, very, very good. Best dive tank by far. And I think we've also got to go for the very good tier. It's got to be Winston. I was thinking about putting Winston in playable just because I think D.Va's better than Winston. But Winston does have some minor advantages. So Winston can block damage quite easily. I know D.Va can do this with a defense matrix, but it is a little bit harder to do. And I know D.Va is great for peel and that stuff, and Winston can still peel for his team. But Winston dropping a barrier in front of the enemy Ana or somebody who relies on line of sight to heal or to do damage can win a fight. And it's the same thing of in the past, Winston will pick a dive target, will go on the dive target, will deploy his bubble on that target while he's doing damage. Of course, the new Winston combo is you leap and you're charging your primary fire, and as you land, you do damage from the land, but then you fire your secondary fire, into them, and then you melee them, and then you primary fire them. Like, that's the Winston sort of burst, and there still is quite a bit of burst there. If you're jumping onto a squishy target, provided you land the alternate fire, which is a bit difficult to do, you can kill him in a lot of cases. So Winston still isn't to be sniffed at, but when you compare this to D.Va, it's just a bit easier to do with D.Va because she's just got that more reliable close range damage from a primary fire, and it's probably easier to hit with micro missiles as well because it's a little bit more forgiving compared to Winston's charged up Tesla cannon. Yeah, Winston's ultimate's okay as well. It's always been decent for contesting points, and so yeah, but Winston is fine. If you're playing Winston and you're playing dive, it's fine. Just don't worry about it. If you've got Winston or D.Va, it's all good. It's all gravy. You should be super happy. So let's drop down into the playable tier. And you know what? I'm going to put Roadhog into this tier. Now, there is an argument for putting Roadhog into a niche pick because he isn't really a tank. He's the only tank in the game that doesn't function as a tank because he has no way of providing active mitigation for his team. He can't eat projectiles, although he eats a lot of burgers, it would seem. But he can't absorb damage with a barrier or whatever. He can with his belly. If you say his belly's a barrier, then sure, it's the sheer size of the man can block damage. But he's just about flanking. He's just about trying to pick people off. His ultimate's really, really good, especially if you use it in conjunction with a Kiriko ultimate, for example, and she'll be available in competitive very soon. But he's just a big fat DPS, Hog is. He's playable because if you get a good Hog player on your team, the whole dynamic of your team changes. So no longer is it about we're pushing with a tank, which it is with Zarya, Orisa, and Sigma, and even the two dive tanks above Roadhog in this list. But with Roadhog, it's like, okay, we've just got a big guy who's also another DPS, so as supports, we just need to make sure we don't let him die if we've got line of sight on him, but we need to expect him to be on the flanks doing whatever he's doing, looking for those picks, because if he does get a pick, it is more valuable in the 5v5 world, because then it becomes 4v5, and if he picks like an enemy DPS or a support off, that's a huge pick. Maybe he's not going to pick tanks off, but it doesn't matter. He's not a tank assassin. He's there to just kill other members of the team while being so annoying for the other tank, because you just don't... If he's in your face, you don't really want to kill him, because you're not going to kill him. He's just going to take a breather and run away, or he's going to get healed up. But you also want to get past him. But if you do get past him, he's going to be able to put hooks into your back line. But I still think the best way to play Hog is that cheese flank Hog on the flanks. Just always flanking, always looking for a pick. It is surprisingly effective. But compared to all the other tanks, Hog doesn't really function as a tank. So if you are a Roadhog player, you're not really a tank, but that's not your fault, because that's the way the game's designed. So I think he's playable, and if you get a Hog on your team, don't expect him to be leading the charge, but just try and supplement what he's doing. If he is flanking, if he is getting those picks, then go for it. It can really, really work. Next up is Reinhardt, and I think Reinhardt's playable as well. You could put Reinhardt into the niche picks section, definitely not in the weak section. I'm going to put him in playable, because I think... I'm going to be a bit lenient here. I've got a soft spot in my heart for Reinhardt. But if you play him like an absolute YOLO, I'm going into the enemy team, and your team back you up, he is so much fun to play, and he can win fights. If this guy just runs into your team and everybody follows, it's like, oh my, what the hell is going on? Like, he's just bashing people. He's really hard to kill. Obviously, he's got his barrier. He's just got a ton of armor and health anyway, and he's really good at close range damage. He's got 2 fire strikes. His ultimate... Actually, you know what? We should really talk about his ultimate, because his ultimate, Earth Shatter, is unstoppable in Overwatch 2 unless they've got a Reinhardt. You will get an Earth Shatter, and it will win you a team fight. But if you're playing absolute balls to the wall, just going in, full bore, like you love it, you just want to smash people in, with your hammer, that is, I should say, then you can get a lot of value with Reinhardt. But, and this is the big but, if the enemy are not playing Ryan mirror matchup, or they're not playing, I don't know, a Junker Queen into you, then you've got a problem. Because these tanks above him, the Zarya, when she's charged, will melt his barrier. The Orisa, I think, is Reinhardt's worst nightmare, because she can shut down all of his abilities. You can throw the javelin into Reinhardt when he's charging, and it will stop him charging. He'll fall to the ground. You can just shut him down. You can even spear him as he's about to drop Earth Shatter, but it takes a bit of skill to pull that off. I mean, you're probably not going to do that, but you can just fortify yourself so you don't get affected by it anyway, and then you can just run through it and try and protect your team. Basically, Orisa annihilates Reinhardt. She is his absolute worst nightmare. But Sigma as well can also put tons of pressure on Reinhardt, because he has that ranged damage potential that is constantly being piled on. Same for the other tanks. Hog as well is obviously pretty good just firing into a barrier, especially with his alternate fire or even his primary fire at close range. But I still think Reinhardt can work. I don't think he's completely terrible. I think he is a legacy relic hero of Overwatch 1, where we were pushing through chokes forever and a day. Now, though, when the maps are more open, he's not really protecting many people with his barrier. He's just kind of protecting himself. But if his team do follow him up, he can be really powerful. If his team don't follow him up and he's just YOLO charging into Orisa's, then he's going to die and he's going to look really silly, and your team are probably going to moan at you. So, yeah, he's playable, but he's also... I think the key with Reinhardt is knowing when you need to come off him, and that's basically when there's an Orisa on the enemy team a lot of the time. Oh, dear. Okay, niche picks. Niche. Or niche. I'm going to say niche because I'm from the UK. We're going to go for Hammond first. So Hammond's a dive tank, and he's not the weakest dive tank, because I'm afraid that award goes to Doomfist. But Hammond is... He's a dive tank lone ranger. He's not really going to be coordinating dives with his team. The thing with Hammond is, I think he was great in Overwatch 1 when he was paired with a dive main tank. So when he was with a Winston, and then you've also got Hammond coming as well, it was really great. That was a good dive. The thing is now, though, you just got Hammond on his own, and Hammond again... this is a very similar sort of... it's a similar thing to Roadhog, really. He doesn't protect his team. Like, he doesn't give your team any active mitigation. All he can do is knock the enemy team around and be disruptive. But in the world of 5v5, especially on the new push maps, you tend to find Hammond gets more success when he is operating almost like a Roadhog, where he's just completely independent from his team. He's coming in at opportune moments. He's knocking people around. He's slamming them to the ground. His ultimate is still fairly decent as well, especially for area denial. And that's kind of what you do with him. But again, you need to know how to play this hero. And again, if you are playing dive, I wouldn't be playing Hammond. I'd be playing Winston or D.Va. Well, I'd be playing D.Va and then maybe Winston if for whatever reason I fancied Winston. not Hammond. So Hammond, again, is in a weird place. Junker Queen. Now, I could put Junker Queen into the weak tier. But I don't think I'm going to do that because I think that needs to be reserved for Doomfist because he's in such a terrible place right now. You shouldn't really be playing Doomfist, which is terrible. That's not great advice, but you should just not be playing Doomfist. He doesn't do anything well. He really needs looking at. And we know Blizzard are going to look at him. Anyway, this isn't about Doomfist. It's about Junker Queen, this bit. Junker Queen. So she got heavily nerfed before Overwatch 2 came out. And this is because she had massive sustain, not only for herself, but also for a teammate. So Command and Shout got heavily nerfed. I believed it provided 100 health over health to allies. Now it only provides 50, I think, to allies, and it decays away. It's not just 100 health and then it's there. I think it decays away. But she took a series of nerfs. This means that she's struggling because when you start putting her against, I mean, if you're playing Zarya and the enemy team's got a Junker Queen, it's just an instant win. She can't stop any of your damage. You're going to be able to just do whatever you like to her, and it's just so difficult for her to get anything done. Her ultimate, though, is pretty good. The fact it applies anti-heal to the enemy team or enemy players that it hits is really good, and that is a really good engage. But I think, again, she's suffering from not really... Like, I don't know why you'd play Junker Queen over Roadhog, because Roadhog's just going to do more damage, right? And it's harder to kill. Junker Queen, she's lost that she's harder to kill element, and with her buffs being nerfed, her active mitigation on a team isn't as effective as it used to be. The speed buff is still nice, but again, I just don't think she's really that good. Like, her damage potential can be quite high, but if you're doing high damage with Junker Queen, you'd be doing even more damage with every tank above her, with the exception of Reinhardt. You know, why play Junker Queen when you can play Orisa? There's these questions that are coming into play because they play very... The playstyles are the same. There's not really... You're not flanking with Junker Queen. You're just in the fight. You need to be in the fight because you need to be applying your wounds to people to keep yourself up, because that's where your self-sustain comes from, unless you're getting healed by your supports. But she's just not as good as Orisa. She's just not as good as any of the tanks above her. So I would really avoid playing Junker Queen because she doesn't really do anything great at the moment. Now, finally, we come to Doomfist, the weakest tank in the game, unfortunately. No, I don't think it would have been like this, based off some of his beta power level, because he was fairly strong. He had a lot of high mobility. The problem with Doomfist is Doomfist doesn't tank, and Doomfist he's like a poor man's Hammond. Doomfist isn't as survivable as Hammond, because Hammond can just go into ball and roll away, use his grappling hook and roll away. Doomfist, if he commits using his abilities, and then he's looking for power block as his defensive ability to charge up his empowered fist, which can then allow him to disengage or maybe continue to engage the enemy. Power block only absorbs 90% damage, so you can damage him through power block. If Doomfist comes into your team and drops power block, you actually can just shoot him, because even the empowered fist, it isn't that powerful. It's not going to wipe your whole team out if everyone just shoots at him, and he's going to take a ton of damage, and he's not going to be able to engage into your team. He's going to need to disengage to get support. And I just really struggle to see why you would ever play Doomfist, because it's so hard to get close to people to do damage to them, because his movement has been like reduced quite heavily. He doesn't really have a very good tank ability. His power block isn't good enough. It's too easy to deal with him when he's using power block. He moves really slow. You can just shoot at him. In fact, most cases, people just ignore him. When he uses power block, they just look at him like, what are you doing, Doomfist? And then he just turns around and runs away because he doesn't have enough damage to be threatening. Like, if he seismic slammed onto you and then pop power block in your face, you just look at him like, what are you doing, Doomfist? What are you doing? Because, he just can't do anything. And when power block expires, what's he going to do? Punch you into a wall and do no damage? And you're just going to be like, what? Unless it's like a 1v1 and you've got low health and you're playing, I don't know, someone like Widow and you grapples down. Yeah, then maybe he can do something to you. But apart from that, nah, he's so bad. But again, Doomfist is one of the heroes that's being looked at by Blizzard. And we're expecting to see buffs come to him for Season 2. All right, guys, thank you for listening to and watching the video. This has been the best tanks for Season 1 ranked in Overwatch 2 competitive. And I think this is a fairly comprehensive list. And I hope I've given good breakdowns of each hero, because there's going to be no patch until Season 2. So with this, we're setting for the long run here. These are the tanks. Now, there is Kiriko coming into the competitive meta in a couple of days. If you're watching this video the day it went live, she may change things, but I think she'll just make dive a little bit better, because she can just dive with the dive tank and make sure they don't die, and it's really strong. Or she can just dive with dive DPS. So maybe she won't change the tank slot as much, but We'll have to wait and see. All right, guys, thank you for listening to the video, like I said. Apologies if my voice has been a little bit weird in this. I've got a bit of a sore throat. I'm hoping it's not the dreaded you-know-what. But, yeah, I'm going to keep pushing through. Thank you as well, guys, for watching the videos that I've been putting out in the last couple of weeks or so. Yeah, everything's obviously going pretty nice. And keep sending in your video clips for consideration to appear on Overanalyzed, which is unitlost.com/overanalyzed. And, yeah, I'll catch you lovely lot on the next video. See you soon.